What is the best powertrain for a high-end luxury car? Is it a V8 petrol engine or is it an electric motor?
That's what we're going to be finding out today, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel for lots more videos like this, most of which involve more sensibly priced cars.
So John, traditionally in a high-end luxury car like a Rolls-Royce or a Bentley, you'd find an 8 or even a 12-cylinder petrol engine, wouldn't you?
You would, and that is because a V8 or a V12 is a very inherently balanced engine, and that means it's very quiet and very smooth, but also they're very torquey low down, which means that they're very effortless to build speed with, which makes the driving very relaxed and easy. But is an electric motor, or even a couple of them, an even better fit? Because we know electric cars are very quiet because there isn't an endless series of explosions going on under the bonnet. And that means there should be even fewer vibrations being felt by the passengers inside.
Yes, and to find out the answer, we've lined up a V8-powered Bentley Bentayga and a fully electric Rolls-Royce Spectre. And before anyone starts leaving angry comments below, we are fully aware these aren't direct rivals. The Bentayga is of course a huge SUV and the Spectre is an enormous coupe. And incidentally, these aren't just two of the biggest cars on the road. That Bentayga is about 5.3 metres long and this Spectre measures almost 5.5 metres from bumper to bumper. They are also two of the most expensive, costing well over £250,000 each. So the aim here is not to decide if a Bentayga is a better car than a Spectre or vice versa. It is mainly to find out if big capacity petrol engines or electric motors are a better choice for huge money no object cars with a big focus on luxury. Anyway, what's the plan today, John?
Well, we've just set off from our offices in Twickenham, southwest London, and we're going to be doing around 200 miles a day, most of which will be on the motorway. And that will give us a good opportunity to find out what these cars are like to drive, are they quiet at a cruise, and also how efficient they are in the real world. And with that information, we'll be able to realistically tell you how many miles you're going to get out of a fully charged battery in that Spectre, and also how many miles you'll get from this Bentayga with a fully brimmed tank.
Sounds good. And because these are such high-end luxury cars, it would be rude not to take a good look at their interiors as well, wouldn't it? So should we do that when I meet you at the midway point for some lunch? Now, John, we've already mentioned these are completely different cars.
They are.
Obviously different body styles. And although there might be some cross-shopping, if you want a very opulent car and you want one of the most prestigious badges on the nose of it, but clearly you're not going to buy a two-door coupe, even a massive one like this if you want to put people in the back regularly, and neither are you if you want an easy-to-access boot with a hatchback. So let's park those very obvious differences and let's focus instead what it's like to sit in the front of these cars. And in this Rolls-Royce, it is incredibly luxurious, isn't it?
It is very nice, isn't it? And I have to say, I do like the fact that the modern generation of Rolls-Royces have always had this Art Deco theme, and they've stuck with it, and it still looks as good as it did when it first came out on the Phantom.
It really does. And when you're buying a Rolls-Royce, you don't just get an interior, you curate.
Really?
Your own.
Have you created this one?
I haven't. Someone at Rolls-Royce's press office has, and they have gone for seashell, the colour here on the centre console and on the lower part of the dashboard, on the outer parts of the seats, moccasin.
Like my slippers?
Yeah, exactly like those. On the central armrest here, on the central parts of the seats and on the insides of the doors. And then there is also peony pink, which is the highlight for the piping on the seats here and the stitching on the centre console and on top of the dashboard there. It's not going to be to everyone's taste. Neither is the colour on the outside, which I believe is called Velvet Orchid. You've also got open pore effect here. And overall, it is incredibly luxurious in here.
I like the fact you've got it on the steering wheel as well.
Yeah, it's a nice touch, isn't it? Actually, the steering wheel is very nice to hold as well. It's quite big, but the rim isn't too thick, so it's very nice to hold when you're driving along. Obviously, we'll drive this car properly in a few minutes. And also, unlike in a lot of modern cars, where you get haptic buttons and things like that, which frustrate us a lot, here, you've got proper physical controls, dials for the air conditioning, and that is just really a breath of fresh air.
Isn't it amazing that one of the most expensive cars in the world sticks with traditional buttons?
It is, and that tells you something.
It does, doesn't it? And it's also nice, as well as the physical buttons. Look, you've got these lovely organ stop controls for the fascia vents there, and they're really nice, aren't they?
Proper metal, aren't they? Listen to that.
Yeah, beautiful. But along with all the physical buttons, there is some technology.
There is, and actually, one of the few derivative bits of the interior of this car is the infotainment system, because it is effectively an iDrive system borrowed from BMW. Now, obviously, BMW owns Rolls-Royce, so that's not hugely surprising. And if you're going to borrow an infotainment system from anyone, then BMW is a good place to start, because you get this rotary controller down here, very easy to use.
With a Spirit of Ecstasy on it, though.
With a Spirit of Ecstasy on it. And even the touchscreen up here, you can use it as a touchscreen, or you can use this controller. It's not like it has BMW logos all over it. It's been re-skinned.
You wouldn't get in and go, that's a BMW system.
No, I think unless you'd come out of a BMW, you'd owned one very recently, you wouldn't really make that connection. Other nice things in here, you've got some shag pile carpets down here.
Oh, it's not shag pile. I don't know what shag pile is. I'm not sure. It's lamb's wool, Will. It's lamb's wool. And look, you've got a beautiful leather heel pad, very traditional Rolls-Royce feature.
That is very nice too. So overall, the interior in this Spectre is pretty fabulous, isn't it? Can your Bentayga hope to compete with this?
Well, shall we go and have a look?
Let's do it.
So this is obviously an SUV, Will.
It is.
That means we're obviously sitting a lot higher up, and you know, it's kind of good because you get a good view out on the road and other road users over the top of the other cars, so you feel a bit more imperious in your Bentley.
You do. But tell me about this interior, because I'm guessing, like with the Rolls-Royce, you can spec it in a variety of different ways.
Well, you can, and I'm going to tell you all about it, but unlike you, I may have cheated, because I printed out a spec sheet. But I did remember to do that, and the only reason is because I have a terrible memory. But I can tell you that this car, we talked about, actually you mentioned your paintwork, didn't you? Which was pink, and this one is pink. And this one is duotone paintwork in magnetic over rose gold paintwork with black wear to the exterior and black painted 22-inch Mulliner wheels. Okay,
I've got 23s on the Spectre.
Yeah, well that just means you're going to burn through your range a bit more. And inside we have got tritone cabin in burnt oak. That must be burnt oak. That will be that. Cricket ball.
That's got to be that red on the
It has, and also on the seats. And camel leather.
Is that actually from a camel?
Well, it says it is, so it must be. And then, of course, this car has the Mulliner pack, because you can see that written over there. Okay. And that means that you get, well, gloss black finishes like this. Now, I'm going to talk about those because I don't particularly like the gloss black, because it feels a waste, because you can have, like your car's got that nice open pore woodwork, which looks really good. Whereas that, I mean, so many cheaper cars have gloss black, don't they? It could just be a plastic like in those. It's not, but it could be.
That is true. You can, though, it's important to point out, have real wood fascias if you want.
Absolutely, and you can have, just like your Rolls-Royce, you can have whatever you want, because even if it's not on the options list, I'm sure Bentley would happily do it for you.
If you pay.
If you pay.
There are some similarities in here, though, aren't there? Because you've still got these chrome organ stops up here. Lots of chrome actually elsewhere in the interior.
And you've got the vents, the same bullseye air vents that the Rolls-Royce has. The only thing I would say is they're not quite as nice as the Rolls-Royce ones, but they're okay.
They're okay. If I flick it, sounds like plastic.
But there are lots of nice metal parts around. I mean, I really like this. Well, it used to be called diamond turn, that kind of finish. It's not. It's a slightly different, but it's got that kind of 3D texture to it, and it's aluminium, and it's really, really nicely done. And then the switchgear as well.
Yes, and like the Rolls-Royce, which has some BMW parts in it, I think in that car they are better disguised than they are in here, because a lot of these switches here very obviously are from an Audi.
They are, and I do agree with you, because really the only thing you can tell in that car, I would say, that's BMW is the sat-nav. And even then, only, or the infotainment system, and even then, only even looking very closely. Whereas here, using the steering wheel, and I'm looking at buttons that are very clearly from, well, any Audi product from the last few years.
Well, from a Q7 about 10 years ago. But I would say, if you're going to use any company as a basis for your interior quality, Audi from a decade ago is probably a good place to start.
I think so, and you can tell that because even if these were bespoke Bentley items, they would make, I mean, why would you make them sound any better, or how could you make them sound any better than that?
That is true. What about the infotainment system though?
So the infotainment system is also derivative. It's you can tell that the function behind it is Volkswagen Group. I'm not necessarily saying it's exactly an Audi system, and Bentley have put their own stamp on it. And to be honest, it's very quick to respond. The screen quality is really good. The software is quite easy to work through. However, the reason why I would say it's not as good as the Rolls-Royce is because it doesn't have an iDrive wheel. You do have a wheel down here that looks like an iDrive one, but it's not. The middle of it is the stop-start button for the engine, and then you twiddle it to go through the various suspension settings, the ride heights, and also the all-terrain settings. Because you can take this off-road.
But you're probably not going to.
Probably not.
Also, one other thing I should point out is that it feels a bit narrower in here. And that's partly because of this big centre console here, but also because the seats in the Rolls-Royce, they're very broad, they're more like an armchair, whereas here you've got some quite big side bolsters holding you in place.
They are. Now, obviously, Bentley is more of a sporting brand traditionally than Rolls-Royce, and that is why you get these more bolstered seats, and the seat cushions are a lot firmer, aren't they? To be honest, if I wasn't comparing it to a Rolls-Royce, I would say these seats are really good. However, I really do like the sort of armchair seats in that Rolls-Royce, because we're always going, there's not enough side support. But the thing is, you never drive that car that fast around corners. And there's something lovely about sitting in that nice wide seat with the armchair feel.
There really is. And I would say that although both cars have incredibly luxurious interiors and they feel really special inside, the Rolls-Royce, for me, just has the edge. And I think now we've had a good look around these interiors, but can I show you what my Spectre is like on the road?
Yes.
Now, this is the first electric car in Rolls-Royce's history, but the company's founders definitely understood the benefits of electric power, didn't they? Because in 1900, 4 years before he even met Henry Royce, Charles Rolls bought an American electric car called the Columbia Electric Carriage, and he was so impressed by it that he said, apparently, and I quote, "The electric car is perfectly noiseless and clean. There is no smell or vibration. They should become very useful when fixed charging stations can be arranged." And it's only 125 years later, and we do now have lots of fixed charging stations.
We have some. We have some.
We could do with more, and they could occasionally be more reliable, but you can definitely plug this thing in, and we will talk more about how quickly it charges in the real world later on.
And it is weird, isn't it? Because you've just given us a history lesson, and it is true that back at the beginning of the motoring age, that people were talking, genuinely going, what are we going to use to provide propulsion? Are we going to use steam? That was the most likely one. Electricity. But the weird one at the time was that this newfangled liquid stuff called petrol, because it was like, oh, it's going to be really explosive. And yet now it's the opposite way around.
And also, I'm happy to report that
Yes.
Charles Rolls was right, because just to the ear, this is certainly a very quiet car, isn't it?
It is, it's really well isolated, isn't it? Just going onto a different surface there, very coarse surface, but even then, it's quite a background noise coming off the tyres. And they are really big tyres, aren't they?
They are, they're massive, 23-inch wheels fitted to this Spectre. The only thing I would say is that even if you switch off what Rolls-Royce calls the Rolls-Royce sound, which is effectively an electronic soundtrack to accompany the acceleration, there is faint hum from the electric motor.
I noticed that, and I thought it was because you had the fake sound switched on. But you saying that that's the noise it makes when everything's turned off?
That is.
I don't get that, because why would you allow people to turn the sound off and then make a car, which I'm assuming is the whole ethos of this car, electric Rolls-Royce, the quietest car in the world, but then you, I don't know, deliberately make it have some sort of weird engine noise?
Yeah, it is strange. We should point out that it's a very subtle noise. It's just audible, and otherwise this is extremely quiet. And even though this is one of the heaviest cars on the road, this is 2.9 tons.
2.9?
Yeah, it's thanks in no small part to the enormous 102 kilowatt hour usable capacity battery this has. It is still pretty quick because it has two electric motors, one on the front axle, another on the rear. Together they can produce up to 577 brake horsepower. So this can do 0 to 62 in 4.5 seconds.
That's not bad, is it, for a 3-ton car?
Not at all. And you're obviously aware that the car is building speed very quickly, but it's not overly aggressive or intimidating.
Well, go on then. It's reasonably intimidating.
Well, for you.
So, I think the ride, I like it. It's my kind of ride in a car like this. So, I like various different types of ride in various different cars. This obviously is all about luxury. So I don't want any pretense of sportiness. I just want the car to waft around. And it does, doesn't it?
It really does.
There is a point sometimes where you go over a crest and you can feel it's a little bit sort of underdamped and just sort of rising and falling quite, you know, sort of in an exaggerated fashion. But that's about it, isn't it? It's very, very good other than that.
Yeah, it really is. In fact, the only time that I've had any complaints is that if you hit a really nasty crevice or a pothole, then there is a bit of a thud. But most of the time, particularly at high speeds, this is an incredibly comfortable car. And although it's not at all sporty, you've got very slow steering, and as I mentioned, it's a very heavy car, so it doesn't really like changing direction quickly. That's not the point of this car, really, is it at all? In fact, it's much more pleasant to just take it easy and waft yourself along rather than trying to go as quickly as possible and really fly around corners.
For the purpose that they've set out to achieve with this car, which is that sort of relaxing thing, the ride is exactly what you want for it.
It really is. I think this is going to be a pretty tough benchmark for that Bentley to beat.
So, in the Bentley, I can tell you there's one big difference straight from the off. And I can tell it because even though I was sitting in the passenger seat of the Rolls-Royce, the visibility is a lot better in this car.
It is.
We talked about you sitting higher up because it's an SUV, and I don't know how you drove that Spectre, because it's not that obviously seeing down forwards, down the bonnet, it's just understanding where the curbs are on the periphery, whereas in this car, because it just feels a lot more open around the sides, I've got these little quarter windows there, I just feel like I can judge the distances between the curbs better, and that just makes me feel more comfortable because I've got 22-inch Mulliner wheels and I don't want to damage them.
Visibility is definitely better.
Yes.
But what about other aspects of the driving experience?
There is an obvious one as well. When I put my foot down, there's a noise, and it's not coming from a sound generator. Well, it is, but it's a V8 twin turbocharged 4-litre sound generator, which I quite like. And I know that some people will say, but this is a luxury car, and being quiet is an element of luxury, but so is a V8, don't you think?
Yeah, I do. I think if you're the sort of person who thinks that any noise is bad and it should all be shut out and you should be cocooned in this peaceful environment, then you probably won't like it, but it sounds really nice, doesn't it?
It does, yeah. And the thing is, I wouldn't say, look, my foot's off the throttle now. Can you hear the engine? It's running, but I can barely hear it. It's only when you put your foot down and perhaps you want to hear that little bit of V8 rumble that you get to hear it.
And how powerful is that V8 engine?
So, it is 542 brake horsepower, so it's a bit less than your car, but then this does weigh a little bit less as well. And that means it will do 0 to 62 in 4.6 seconds.
Okay, so there's barely anything.
We're not going to tell that, are we?
No, we're not.
And do you want to see what it's like when you put your foot down?
Why not?
Okay.
It is very fast. The only thing I would say is I did notice a bit of a delay when you put your foot down there.
You can have your subjective opinions about the differences between electric and petrol. One thing that I would say is an objective thing, you're in your Spectre, when you put your foot down, because it's an electric car and it develops a lot of torque instantly. In this car, when you put your foot down, the gearbox has to have a little think about things, and then the turbos have to spool up, and then eventually you get going, and there is just that momentary delay, which can be frustrating, and I have noticed it when we've been sort of zipping in and out of lanes on motorways and just building speed. Yeah. This is a slightly coarse surface we're travelling on at the moment. There's definitely more road rumble off the tyres now. However, when you hit a really smooth section of tarmac in this car, I would say it's as good-ish as the Spectre.
Well, we drove down this very same road in the Spectre a few moments ago, and it was quieter along here, I think.
Yeah.
And also, it's just slightly less open. You hear a little bit less of the outside world, not only tyre noise, but suspension noise, I think, as well. And when it comes to ride, I would say this is fractionally firmer.
Well, I think that's because you've spent all day long in a Rolls-Royce Spectre, which is very soft. However, I spent all day long in this car, and I can tell you when you first get into it, it has that same essence that the Spectre has, that same cushioning, like cosseting softness to the ride. But it's like, if you've got the two cars, they're very similar traits, but this one's just shifted along the spectrum. So it is just that little bit firmer, and you do feel a little bit more from some of the impacts, but it's still really good over dips and crests in the road, and also when we left the office earlier on, over some of the speed bumps in London, it was fantastic. But also, like Spectre, if you do hit a pothole or something sharp, you will hear it thump. So it's kind of very similar, just not quite as good. We talked earlier on about the fact that Bentley's a more sporting brand, and it does. And I can even make it more sporting because with my little wheel down here that we talked about when we were in the interior section, I can put it in the sports section. And actually, we talked about the ride being quite costly. Now in the sports mode, it's really almost like a sports SUV. It's almost too firm. So I'm going to put it back to the Bentley mode, which is the in-between mode. And then it still becomes really dynamic. The steering, for example, is much quicker, much more alert, and the Bentley wants to turn into corners much more eagerly than the Spectre does.
Yeah, even from the passenger seat, you can feel the body control is quite a bit better.
Yeah.
And this just feels a more agile thing altogether.
It does. And it just feels like you have that sort of sense of oftability, but the edge over the Spectre comes when, for example, on a nice twisting country road like this, you want to just enjoy a bit of sporty driving. You have something that is capable of doing that, although we're not saying it's a sports SUV.
Okay, well, we've got to get back to London.
Yes.
We've still got a fair few miles to do.
Yes.
So how about you drive my Spectre now, and I drive your Bentayga to keep the efficiency side of things as fair as possible.
All right, then.
And then when we get towards London, we will charge the Spectre back up again, we'll brim the Bentayga, and then we'll be able to crunch the numbers and work out how much the trip cost.
Let's do it.
Okay, so let's start with the cost of the journey in both cars. And I spent £85 and 5p because I needed 95.6 kilowatt hours of electricity to get the Spectre's battery back up to 100%. And I used a really expensive grid serve charger for the job. So I was paying 89p per kilowatt hour. If I'd have charged at home at the current energy price cap of around 25p per kilowatt hour, then I would have spent £23 and 58p, and obviously even less than that if I was signed up to a cheap overnight tariff. But how does that compare with your V8 Bentayga?
Well, the mighty V8 needed 36.61 litres of petrol at a cost of £1.57 per litre. So I spent a total of £57 and 44 pence. But because we finished at a motorway services, I was obviously paying top whack for that fuel. And based on the average price of fuel today, now obviously prices are pretty volatile at the moment with what's going on in the Middle East, but I'd have spent £52 and 21p.
Interesting. So it was actually quite a bit cheaper on the day to make the journey in your Bentley. And what was your fuel economy like?
Well, the trip computer was claiming 22.3 mpg at the end of the 196-mile journey. But when you work out the actual litres of fuel we used to get an accurate reading, then the average economy rises slightly to 24.3 mpg. No, okay, I know that's not amazing in the grand scheme of things, but I don't think too bad for a big V8 Bentley, especially as we were mostly driving on the motorway.
Okay, well, my trip computer was showing 2.4 miles per kilowatt hour at the end of the journey. But when you charge an EV, you will always lose some energy. So based on the kilowatt hours that we pulled from the grid, my efficiency drops to 2.1 miles per kilowatt hour. And that isn't very good at all, really.
No, not really.
But if you're spending hundreds of thousands of pounds on a luxury car like this, then you're probably not going to care too much about your running bills. But you probably will care about your time. And that's where your Bentley has a massive advantage, doesn't it?
It does, because I use less than half a tank of fuel for the entire trip. So I could have actually got to the end, stopped, turned around and done exactly the same trip again and still been fine. And even if I did fill the tank en route, it would have only taken me a couple of minutes.
Yes, and this is where the Spectre falls apart a bit, because as lovely as it is to sit in and to drive, the range really isn't good enough, is it?
No.
This is the type of car that its owner might want to take touring Europe. And in our journey of 196 miles, that took the battery from 100% down to 11%, which suggests a real-world range, admittedly on a fairly chilly February day, of around 218 miles. And when you've got £45,000 Teslas that would comfortably be able to do more than 300 miles in the same conditions, then that's going to be pretty tough to stomach for a lot of buyers spending this much money. And remember, if you're on a long journey and you're charging to 80%, and then plugging in again when you get down to 20%, you're going to be stopping every 130 miles or so. So that's about 6 stops just for charging to get you from London down to Saint-Tropez.
That's crazy. And it's not exactly like the Spectre's that quick to charge either.
Well, these things are relative. So it can pull 195 kilowatts of power from a fast enough charging point, which is a lot more than, say, a Renault 5. But it's also a lot less than a £60,000 BMW iX3, which can charge at speeds of 400 kilowatts. Now, on paper, the Spectre can go from 10 to 80% in about 35 minutes. And we were plugged in to a really fast 400 kilowatt charger. And guess how long I was waiting?
Well, I don't know, 35 minutes.
Exactly 35
Really?
minutes.
Oh, okay.
So it proves sometimes these times are accurate. And the full 11 to 100% charge took 1 hour and 8 minutes. Although obviously charging speeds really do slow down as you get beyond 90%, and you're not going to sit around waiting for the battery to get to full. And it's not recommended to charge most EVs to 100% regularly anyway.
No, that's true. But the thing is, if you think about it, is a Rolls-Royce owner really going to want to stop for more than half an hour every 130 miles and then hang around in some grotty motorway services or, I don't know, a McDonald's car park and potentially have to queue waiting around with the rest of the people for a charging spot?
Probably not. And for me, charging is the biggest hurdle for luxury EVs like this, because however brilliant the car is to drive and however lovely the interior is, I can't think of many experiences less glamorous than hanging around waiting for your EV to charge. And a longer range or faster charging would obviously help a bit, but it wouldn't get to the root cause of the problem.
No. And when you think about it, Tesla reserves some of its supercharging spots for Tesla drivers, don't they? So you would think that Rolls-Royce could do something similar with the Spectre, because at the moment you've got no priority over an MG4 driver or Kia EV4 driver, and who's just nabbed the last charger. So I appreciate Rolls-Royce isn't going to do the same as Tesla and roll out a charging network across the country for a handful of Spectres, but you'd think they could do a deal with a charging provider to do some sort of concierge service, maybe, to be able to phone up en route and reserve a charging spot of a VIP area. Get someone to, I don't know, pop along and unravel the charging cables for you and hand a couple of cucumber sandwiches through the window, that kind of thing. But seriously, just to make the process a little bit more luxurious and feel a bit more becoming of a Rolls-Royce.
Yeah, I agree.
So at the moment, the conclusion is combustion engines are definitely the preferred choice for high-end luxury motoring like this.
Okay, so there you have it. Electric cars make a lot of sense in most price points, but perhaps not right at the top of the luxury car market. Thanks for watching this review. If you want to watch another one, click up there. And for our full detailed written review on both of these cars, click there to head to whatcar.com.